Okay, good morning, friends. We're going to get started with our launch day for Early Childhood Literacy Academy. So today is you have a lot of stuff that we sent with you in your bags. So if you locate your bag and take that out, and there's a really important piece inside that bag we hope you have. But if you don't fret, because we have everything electronically that we can use today if we need to. But there's a handbook. So the handbook is purple. If you would take out your handbook, there you go. I see some of those books coming out. There you go. Thanks, Melanie. I gave mine to one of you, so I don't have mine here today. I have a paper copy of the things we're going to use today. Perfect. Okay. So in your ECLA handbook, if you will just open up into this page that looks like this. Oh, I'm going to take my blur off my camera. There we go. Didn't know that was still on. So if you would just open up to this agenda page. So we're going to be toggling back and forth today. We're going to have lots of hands-on things for you to do. We're going to show you the virtual network that we'll be using, because we have 3 asynchronous sessions that we're going to talk about across the school year. But all that comes around. So the first thing to do is to write your name in your handbook. I know that sounds silly, but when you get back to school, a lot of people have the same handbook, looks just like yours. So it's always a great idea to do that. The first thing today, we're going to give, our goal is for you to have as similar as possible experience as the folks that attended face-to-face. Now, we do know that there's nothing like being together face-to-face in one room. We always want to do that. But we also know that on a Friday, and there's a few of you, and we didn't even know that we were going to have COVID then, but it just worked out. But that sometimes the virtual thing really can make a difference. So we're going to alter our agenda today. So there'll be times that we stop. We'll say, let's go get off Zoom, and you go to this activity and you come back. Then there'll be another time we'll have a hard stop, and you'll have an assignment, and you'll upload things to Google. So we're going to be doing a mix of things. It will be the same content as the folks that attended on May 19th or May 20th, but we will be doing things a little differently. So on your agenda, we provided these boxes. Allison designed this as a map. Now, Allison recently had a child have surgery, and she was, as any of you know that have had surgery yourself, or some family member of yours have surgery, when you get there at the hospital and you're anxious. I mean, it's not where you go to work every day. It's not like you're walking in your building. And when she got there, they had this map like this for parents, and it told them what they would do first, second, third, and then what would happen last. And it gave them not really a time, but it gave them a flow. And she said, I think I'm going to start doing our agendas that way. So we make sure people know what we hope to learn today and what we hope to discuss, and also keep us on track. So the first thing on your agenda you'll see is our overview. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time. It's going to feel like a lot of time in the overview, because we're going to take you deep into Flipgrid, and they've renamed Flipgrid Flip. It's really funny because forever I would forget it was Flipgrid and I would call it Flip. And, I guess they decided that Flip's really a fun way to say it. So we'll take you to Flip, to our network, and you'll be able to see other people from May on there. So that's kind of cool. And you'll be able to watch each other. And that's mainly how we're going to work through the school year, is through Flip. Then we're going to talk a lot about dialogic reading. You're going to experience some things. We're going to talk about interactive read alouds. We're going to go deeply into some research around dialogic reading and peer and those strategies. We're going to move then. We're going to talk about universal design for learning, because we're going to show you some lessons that we've designed using universal design for learning and using the strategies for dialogic reading and peer. And then we're going to move into the next piece of our agenda, phonologic awareness. And we're going to be showing you some things for activities and some things that we'll be doing, because those, when we submitted to the Kentucky Department of Education to be approved as a vendor, those were the 2 big bodies of research that we use: phonologic awareness and dialogic reading and peer. So when you think about that, sorry, when you think about that, it sounds like, well, that's going to be enough for today. I hope you think that's going to be enough, but also it's going to build on your background knowledge and your schema and context. We know you know a lot about reading aloud to your children, and we also know that you know a lot about just building oral language. Your grant that you're on with with KDE really measures developing oral language, and dialogic reading is one of the best ways to do that. So I'm going to share screen right now. Now on your email this morning, I sent you the, hold on here. I sent you, oops. Let me get back to the page I want to be on, just a moment. Okay, should work better now. I must tell you, you'll see throughout the day that I'm the woman of 550,000 tabs open. So all kinds of things can happen when I share screen. So I shared this slideshow with you, and knowing that we could have all kinds of things happen today. Sometimes it's on your end, sometimes it's on our end. The internet can do crazy things. Hopefully everything will go smoothly. But if you have this slideshow, and then we'll get you started, then we could even talk on the phone if we needed to. In fact, I'm going to put my phone number, meant to do that early on, and whoops, so sorry. I want to put, I'll go back and hold on. I'm going to put it in the chat. This is my phone number, so we keep that. We want to write that down somewhere else in case we do get cut off. That's my cell. I'll keep it here. And please call if something happens and you get cut off and you need other ways for us to be together, because we'll be able to problem solve that. So you've hopefully already been able to download those two things, and we're just going to jump in. I'm going to leave my screen just like this for a while, because I think you'll still be able to see, and it allows it to navigate faster. What is literacy? Well, we see literacy much bigger than only reading. And I know you are the folks that understand that we're going to look at the new early childhood standards. And we're so happy about that, because those standards really delineate now, how receptive language grows into expressive language. And I know so many of our parents and things really only see literacy start when they can decode and call out words and then comprehend that. But we know that literacy begins with listening. Melanie has a brand new grandson, and we were on a Zoom meeting and working, and he was just listening and looking at that screen. He was receiving language. He is 3 months old now. Is that right, Melanie? We may have lost her off. We'll see. But anyway, I think he's 3 months old, but you could see he was.
I'm sorry. Can I share this little video she sent?
Oh, please do.
Where she's talking.
Yes, please.
If y'all can, I don't know if you can see, I'll try to, probably can't see it, but.
Yes, I do. I love you. Yes, I do. Oh, I love you. Yes, I do. I love you.
Oh, that's Melanie. It's great.
Yeah, that's the video is not very clear, but it's like he's trying to talk back to her.
He is expressing.
Amazing.
He is. So I could see he wasn't expressing yet last time you showed me that, but he is expressing now. He's responding back.
And that just happened like I'd say from 10 weeks to 12 weeks, he started doing that. And you all that have children, I'm sure notice that too, but it's amazing to me.
It is amazing. And it's amazing because when you look at those standards, you see it start to happen. And you can even hear his vowel sounds beginning. It's incredible. So we say that because you are the people that believe that listening and then speaking. Everett is 3 months old. He's working on communicating now, not reading and writing yet, but who knows? I'm telling you, by one, it could be happening. Could be happening. So we want you to know that we believe in that, and we also, everything we do, we surround it in the developmental domains of early childhood. So we are those people that know that language and motor work together, that all these pieces, communication, social, emotional. So everything we're going to do, we're not just going to stay in cognitive. We're going to work across those domains, and we have set these activities up. Allison really has designed these activities so that it respects those domains and also allows you to assess more than one domain in these activities, because we know in preschool you just got a short window, or childcare, you have a short window, and you've got a lot to get done in that amount of time that they can give you their attention. So John Hattie came to GRAC, and this has been before the pandemic, and when he came in, he was showing us this research, and Allison always puts this in because it was kind of, one of those things that we forget. We forget the difference that you make. So I would like for you to take a second, look at this slide. So in 1900, people all across the world, not just the United States, but all across the world, only 14% were literate in literacy and numeracy. But in 2000, there were only 14% that were not literate. So I'm going to stop share for a second, and I'd like for you to unmic. Why do you think, please everyone unmic, and let's just talk about that. Why do you think that's true?
I think we're a global economy now. People have access to the internet and want to be able to read it. People who couldn't afford books or didn't have access to them or didn't know where to get them can almost always find them now.
Absolutely. What else? What else had you think about?
Transportation to and from schools.
Yeah.
Ride a horse because you live 15 miles away from the only schoolhouse. You didn't go all the time.
That's right. And even in 1900, not everybody even had access to school. Let's think about that. Even in our country, who had access to education in 1900? Let's think about that. Let's talk about that.
Rich people.
Primarily males, men.
Yes.
From wealthy enough families that they didn't have to work the farm.
Yes. People that had the luxury of getting an education and having materials to even use. What else? What else have we not thought about that was not available then, that we do have available now? Just take a stab. You can't say anything that's wrong, I promise.
Education to know it's important.
Okay, the expectations. I mean, like in 1900 or, even 1940, 50, whatever, it was still acceptable that, people didn't even go through the 8th grade, right? I mean, like if people learn to read, sometimes they would need to be working at home. You mentioned that. But expectations, and also, what about, did all children even have access? I mean, could children with disabilities go to school?
Not normally.
Right. Think about those stories, those emotional stories that you've heard. I mean, like the Helen Keller stories, and and all those, there's just all kinds of stories out there, that just those tiny fractions of stories that were told, but she had a governess, right? She was still very wealthy. So this takes us to the part about learning to be a reader and learning to be, numerate, to be a productive citizen is part of your rights. It's part of your rights in this country to have access to free and public education. And those laws did not change until, just about my life, in my lifetime, they changed. So that's pretty profound when you think about the free and public education. So all those compensatory school attendance pieces, it wasn't until the last 15 years that they even required you to, to have a driver's license, that you had to be in good standing at school. That's just been within the last few years. So I'm just saying that although we've had access, we really didn't make that be more of a right. And because what happens, and not to go into too much of systems, but once you make something be a right, then all other systems need to support that right to make sure more and more people have access. So, that is something that we just find to be something we forget about. Now, in the notes, you'll see a lot of notes from John Hattie's work that we left in there for you to see, because it's amazing if you ever get an opportunity to talk to him or be with him, with the things that he's thought about and how our educational systems have both thrived and also how they have so many challenges. We're not all that. We don't have it at 100%. And we still, in fact, we have some systems that kind of make sure we'll never get to 100%. So we're really still looking and learning about that. In your handbook, I'd like for you to turn to page 3. And you'll see the simple view of reading. This came out, several years ago. And when I was, first teaching, this is when we really started working on decoding. And we worked so much on decoding, which we should, that we forgot about the comprehension piece. How many times have you heard people say, I can call those words, but I don't have any idea what it means? Especially when you're like maybe in tier 3 vocabulary. We'll talk more about that. Or you're like, once you move into upper level books that are nonfiction, if the language is so different than what you're accustomed to, you can't comprehend it. So all these things go together. So we had this period of time that we finally understood, okay, it's decoding and it's comprehension. You've got to have both. It's really not an either or. Then about in 2000, this says 2001, this is another page, still on page 3 in your handbook. I'd like for you to look at this rote. And I would like for you to look deeply at the reading rote. And I'm going to take this off screen because I want us to see each other's faces, because this really starts to unpack reading a little bit. And when you notice those strands in the rope, and that when sailors and things, when they have a certain level of rope, it's all about not just the individual parts, but how those parts are wound together that talk about its strength. Well, reading's the same way. It's like a DNA almost. So look at those words in that reading rope and let's just react to those. What do you notice? And how is it different from just saying it's decoding and comprehension? How has it evolved?
And we just keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces, and smaller pieces of information are easier to understand individually. So you can get more specific in what you're referring to.
Absolutely. What else? That's right. It's broken down into almost skills and pieces to understand. What else do you notice?
I'll keep talking. I don't mind talking.
Let's let some other people talk too. I agree with you, Kara. I appreciate you talking, but I hear what you're saying. But they're
I mean, I don't mind. I just don't want to like take somebody else's turn.
yeah, they're going to get warmed up. I promise. So, what else do you notice?
I was just gonna say that like when you take language comprehension, it's broken into this, but then that wraps around itself, and then word recognition, you have to have these things kind of wrap around themselves, and then they come together and wrap around each other. So it's like you have to kind of have the groups correct before they can continue grouping into bigger things. You can't just one piece of this and one piece of that and expect it to work.
What else? Let me ask a different way. What do you think? So Kara talked about that those pieces come together within themselves as a unit, and then those come together with another unit. But you see some words that have like arrows with them on the road. Somebody other than Kara? I agree. Kara's been helping us out a lot. So somebody else, what do you see? What do you think about those words with the swoosh arrows on your reading rope? What about you, Melanie? What do you think about those swoosh arrows that? Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, and it looks like if those strands don't come together correctly, I was just reading down at the bottom, it says that it's connected later to reading disability. So if you don't get one of those right, it's going to get you off track.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's what those little arrows are referring to, but.
Right. And let's think about developmental things that we can see. So maybe about our own well, let's talk about a child first. Let's just talk about a really young child with motor development. When they're first starting to take their first steps, how that they get one piece of that, like they might put out one foot first and then try to balance. And they put that foot out and they have to find their place in space, right? They have to find that proprioceptive feedback. They have to find that where they are in space. And then put the other foot out and they have to do that. But then over time, what happens? That becomes an automatic, right? Like us right now, unless we've had some kind of injury or some reason to need physical therapy again or surgery or something, those are automatic responses. Well, reading is that way, just like you've been saying. When everything is running the rope and it's automatic, it's an automaticity. But when there's a fray in that, like maybe you've had, maybe you've had an injury on your knee, or maybe you've had an injury on your ankle, and although it's just one little part of your leg, it throws your whole balance off, right? You've all experienced these kinds of things in life. Well, the same thing's true with reading. And so you've already mentioned this, but that's part of why it's important to understand the parts, is so you know back on how to do intervention. You know how to go back and work on things like a therapist does for physical therapy. It kind of helps me because I have a context for that. I've hurt my knee before, I've hurt my ankle before. And it's amazing how if you've hurt a little body part and you walk differently, then maybe your back's going to hurt. Maybe your shoulder's going to, all these things connect. And the same thing's true in the brain and reading. And so that's what in the active view that Melanie pointed out in the bottom part of this page on your handbook, it reminds us that not only is it the, so now we're evolving more. It's not only is it the decoding and the comprehension, but look how it also brings in the social culture. So it brings the child into it. So we're not little robots that, you know, we can just give you so much phonemic awareness and give you so much comprehension strategies and read you so many times and boop, you're a reader, because your own language schema comes through. You know, think about little Everett there that we had, he's 3 months old. He's already, his mother is a speech language therapist. I mean, he's already communicating back, versus a child that hasn't had those experiences. So I say all that in that this is complicated. It's not, so when something doesn't happen with automaticity later on, it's, you know, it's really to be expected, but as teachers, that's what we're trying to figure out. We'll go back to share screen. We talked about that already. Now, this looks more like what you're accustomed to seeing when you think about your 5 levels of phonemic awareness. And it's in your handbook on page 4, if you would be sure and look at that. Now, this does not mean to imply that these are real steps. Like, it's not a gatekeeping. We don't have a gate at the 3rd step and say, oh, you can't go on to onsets and rhymes until you've done the rhyming and alliteration. But what we think about it in this way. We want to be sure, and we want you to test us today. We want you to see, did you give us experiences to go all across this? But it does give us some data again that if kids are having some difficulty, what you might want to go back to. So the difference in phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and those pieces of things we're going to talk about more. Okay. I'm going to come out for a second and I'm going to go into a video that we did. And it's similar to what we had done with Mr. Everett. Here we go. Okay, this is a 1-year-old child, and it just happened to be in one of our friends. She's with her sister. This is her sister that's in high school, and they're out on the porch and they're calling for a dog. And they don't know that we're, you know, going to see this. What happened is they put it on Facebook. After they put it on Facebook, we called them up and said, "Hey, can we share your child's expressive language at our training?" So the first time, it's very short. I want you to look at it and I want you to notice sweet baby as she is learning a lot about communication about her dog here.
Come here, Braxton. Braxton. Go for it. Braxton. Go for it. Go for it. Braxton. Braxton. Braxton.
Okay, now we're going to watch it again. I'll let you watch it first just to enjoy and get a feel for it. And I want you to jot down, get your paper, get your pen, it's on your notes. I want you to jot down what are some of the evidence pieces that you see that lets you know that this sweet baby girl is receiving language. First of all, how is she receiving? And then also how is she expressing? We go back.
Braxton. Go for it. Braxton. Go for it. Go for it. Braxton.
Okay, so what did you jot down? What were the clues visually or what you heard, whatever, with all your senses that you could see that this sweet baby girl is receiving and expressing language? How about you, Whitney?
I wrote down that she was listening to the older girl, and so she was shouting, and that she was mimicking the hand gestures that the older girl was doing, and that when the dog did come, they were praising her and the dog. So that's what I wrote down.
Okay, thanks. How about you, Alicia?
I wrote the same thing. I just put the sister was clapping her hand on her leg, and you could see the baby just completely copying what she was doing.
Absolutely mimicking and copying and you could see by expression, that she was pleased with her communication. She felt like she was making a difference. How about you, Heather?
I put that she was like hearing her mom or her sister by like mimicking what she was doing as well. And she was like slapping her knee just like the older person was doing and praising the dog when it come to her.
That's right. Praising that dog and feeling very pleased. So what do we want to do? We want to do something we think we do well. And Miss Harper thinks she does that really well now. You could see her feet jump. Our sister kind of had to pull her back. She was just learning to walk. She was in her socks. And so all that excitement. Did you notice any syllabications or did you notice the sounds were patterning? Let's talk about that.
I think she sounded just like who she was mimicking. Like, not only was it the inflection, it was the cadence, it was the volume, it was how often, she was following right along with exactly what was being said behind her.
Yes. And so in that active view of reading, where it talks about your social cultural piece you're bringing in, she's bringing in all that oral language from her family. She's bringing in those experiences, like me, I'm talking with my hands. I'm doing all these, I'm bringing all that to my language. It's not all just in a box inside my brain. It's all coming together. All my cultural pieces are coming out. I say that because when I had our first grandchild, when she was, I don't know, somewhere between 9 or 10 months old, she would say bye when she was going to leave. And let me tell you this, she didn't say bye. She said bye. It sounded like a sheep. The first time she said bye, I thought, what in the world? Why is she saying bye like that? And then I heard myself going bye, bye, myself. So they imitate us. And so I know that about oral language. And that's why we get to phonemic awareness and things. All those things matter about how we produce sound. Because I promise you, when I first, for many years, I didn't produce, and I still don't produce my sounds exactly as they should be produced. But all that sound production, all those things matter. So let's go ahead. And so when we think about here, one thing we want to go back to this slide is we would not say with a 1-year-old, we're going to work on syllables, but you could hear her say Braxton, right? You could hear that in her voice. So they're mimicking syllables. When she claps, when she's going, she's getting that rhythm, that meter. So all these experiences, that's why dialogic reading and things are so important. We're going to keep coming back to this, but Michelle, one of our consultants that's coaching today and couldn't be with us on the call, she created a placemat for you. And I'm going to click on it so you can see what it looks like, because on your slides, now you have it. So you could look at all of those language standards, and we're going to be coming back to that. Then let me go back out of here. Then hold on. Then this is the link to the Governor's Office of Early Childhood. So you can see, takes a moment for this to pull up. Sorry. But you can see, you can click on the birth to 3, you can click on like 3 to 4, and you can get all of your new standards. And we think that's so important because those were just released this summer for you to spend time. And we're going to do that some more today too. So here we go. This grant that you're working through really looks at oral language. And we at ECLA, at GREC, when we think about oral language, this is what we're thinking about. We're thinking about all of these components. So when you look at Miss Sweet Harper, you know, she is understanding vocabulary. So she was up in here and she's, you know, very young, but, you know, she really, we didn't work with her on morphology, but we do as we get into ages, other ages, we'll work through all of these pieces. So what we're going to be doing is every time we debrief something today, we're going to ask you, which of these pieces in oral language are we working through? And we'll talk more about that too. Allison's going to do a lot about this in a little bit. So in your handbook, you're going to see that the pages about the virtual session. So turn to that. Now, here's the good news. You have received your kits already. So you had 2 bags. One bag was a plastic shopping kind of bag, and you'd had August, October, February labeled on other packages. These are the pieces you're going to open for your virtual session. So you can already open August because guess what? We're September 2nd. And you have until September 15th. You can go in later on, not now, not today, later on, and you can go in, do this activity, and then you're going to do that again in October and February. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But in order for us to get started, we want to practice just like you do with your kids. We want to practice everything. We don't want you to get out there on this virtual little network by yourself and go, I don't know what the heck's going on here. So there's some things you need. You need your bear. So everybody get out your bear. Okay. And you're going to need your handbook. And because on your handbook, you've got some pages in there that you're going to be using. And then you can either scan that QR code, or you on your handbook, you can scan it on your handbook, or you can go to Flipgrid or flip.com. And when it says enter the code, enter this code 8CD6627. Now, if you just scan it, it's going to take you there. So it's going to be easier for you. It is going to ask you if you want to, use your Microsoft or Google account. We suggest you use your Google account because all of you have a Google account through the schools and will work. That's how it is for GREC. It works easier that way. So
is this the handbook you're talking about?
I'm sorry, would you ask again, please?
Is this the handbook that you're talking about?
Or, well, hold on. Let me see if I can see you.
Sorry.
Yes, that is it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
And that's on page 5.
Thank you, Melanie. So turn to page 5, scan. Now, I scan often on my phone, but not that you need to. That's how I do it a lot. You also, if you don't want to use your phone, you can use your device you're using. You can just use a computer or anything and do it. What you will need, though, is a device that has a video camera because you're going to be videoing yourself. So let's just go there. I'm going to go to Flip. So this is what it looks like when you get there, and you're going to see 2 days. You're going to see one that says launch day and has May because that's when we first did it. And then you're going to see August. So we don't want you to look at August yet because we're going to look at launch day. So let's click on launch day. So everybody's screen, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on your computer, should look like this. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Allison has it's a 7-minute video, and she's going to tell you what to do, and we're going to practice that. But guess what, guys? You've got my cell phone number here. If you have any trouble, you give me a call. So I'm going to say that we're going to have you just get off your Zoom, or you can just make it where your video's off and your sound's off. If you're on a device that works well in, because sometimes if you have your Zoom open and you're using Flipgrid, it's a lot of bandwidth. It depends on where you are. So we invite you to get off Zoom, take 30 minutes, listen to her, look at all of these pieces here, and look at what other people recorded, and then get back, and then you do your recording, you practice. If you have problems, you call me. Okay? Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? All right. I'm going to turn this recording off.
All right, my friends. So, Jamie, did we want to read Goodnight Gorilla together, or do we want to let them read it independently?
Well, maybe independently, since everyone's doing a little bit different things there.
Okay. Well, everybody take some time right now. Do give yourself a little picture walk through the book, Goodnight Gorilla by Peggy Rathman. We chose this book because this is a book that most preschool teachers currently use in their curriculum. So we wanted to use a book that we thought would be meaningful to you and you could use at some point during the school year. Go ahead and read this book again, even if you've read it before, just to refresh your memory, because we're going to do a dialogic reading experience. If you are joining us virtually later, then you can just go ahead and read this now. We could pause and then come back. So let's give everybody about 3 minutes to read this book. It's a pretty short one. You think that's fair? Okay. All right, so I'm going to start my timer now and take 3 minutes to read and enjoy this book. Okay, so we're going to model, Jamie and I are going to model a strategy now that's called dialogic reading. And then after we do it, we will debrief it with you and show you where to find it in the handbook. Okay, so Jamie and I have read this book together in small group. Okay, I'm the teacher and she's the student. We've enjoyed it once just for fun. And then we've just had a second reading of it together. So Jamie, I love that book, Goodnight Gorilla. And I think my favorite part is when on this Goodnight page right here, with the lion, like when I realized that gorilla has stolen his keys and he's sneaking all those animals home. And it makes me wonder, I wonder if we were going to the zoo, what animal, would you want to bring an animal home from the zoo?
Yes.
Okay, which animal would you love to bring home from the zoo?
I would like to bring home that big lion.
Oh, you would like to bring home a big lion with a furry yellow mane?
Yes, I would like to bring home a big lion with a furry yellow mane.
Oh my goodness. And it might say, roar. Can you say that with me? I want to bring home a big lion with a furry yellow mane that says, roar. Can we say that together?
I want to bring home a
big
lion with a furry yellow mane that says, roar. It's hard to do that with a little COVID.
It is. It is. Sorry, I shouldn't have given you the animal sound. I was trying to clear out your vocal cords.
Yeah, you were working on my my singing
vocal
voice.
massage. Yeah. So what Jamie and I were modeling there is peer and crowd. And Jamie, if you'll put the PowerPoint slides back up, and if you all will open to page 11 of your handbooks, I'm not sure if you can see me or not, but open to page 11. It will tell you the prompt that Jamie and I just went through. So the prompt that we went through is peer, or I'm sorry, the routine that we went through is called peer. And the P stands for prompt, okay? So if you look below, you'll see crowd prompts, or you could think of those, sometimes we call those crowd questions, all right? Crowd questions, it's an acronym to help us remember to ask different types of questions to increase our children's oral language experience and vocabulary. Okay, so and listening comprehension. Okay, so when we look at that first one, it would be a complete question. The next one is recall. O is open-ended, WH questions, and then D for distancing. If you'll turn your book to page 12 or look at the next PowerPoint slide, this will make even more sense to you, okay? Completion, an example of a completion question I could have asked is, the zookeeper tells the animals, blank, fill in the blank. Jamie, what's he saying? Oh, have you lost your mute?
Sorry. Yes, I've got it back now. When I'm sharing, I have to find my mute. I don't even know that. It's a
Sorry.
panic feeling when you have to
I'm
find your
so
mute.
sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
No, that's okay.
So the zookeeper tells the animals.
Good night.
Yeah, okay, that would be a completion question. Recall, what did the gorilla take from the zookeeper? Can someone mic on and say, what did he take from the zookeeper?
His keys.
Excellent, okay. An open-ended question would be, how do you think the animals felt when the gorilla left him out? Anybody?
Excited.
He felt excited. Good. Okay. And then my WH question, why was the zookeeper's partner surprised? If we look at this page here, I love this page here. There's not page numbered, but I'll hold it up and show you. When you just see her eyeballs really big after they say good night and she hears from all the animals, why was the zookeeper's partner surprised? What do you think? Anybody? I'll ask the question again. Why was the zookeeper's partner surprised?
She wasn't expecting animals in her room.
Yeah, none of us expecting to have a whole zoo in our room. And then the last question is the distancing question. And that's the one you heard me ask Jamie, would you like to take an animal home from the zoo? And Jamie said, I'd like to take a lion. And I said, and then we described the lion. Okay. You could also expand that and say, why would you like to bring home a lion? Okay. So you're not like, I just asked you all of those questions in one sitting. You would never ask all crowd questions in one sitting. This is not an assessment of comprehension. When you're working in small group or one-on-one with a child, you're going to choose one or two crowd questions. Okay. The plan is the idea here is with dialogic reading that you're going to choose a book that you're going to read multiple times during that week. Okay. Maybe you're going to read it once in circle time just for fun. Maybe you're going to read it in small group time. And then maybe you're going to buddy read it one-on-one with another child. Okay. So you're going to read this book several times as you pull those children throughout the week. And obviously it's not going to be every day. You're going to vary which questions you ask. So the second time you read it, you might ask a completion question and a recall question. And the third time you read it, you might ask a WH question or a distancing question, okay? You don't have to get through all 5 questions during your week with this, but what you want to be sure you're doing is varying the types of questions that you ask, okay? Do you find, while we're talking about these questions and these prompts, I would love to hear from you, okay? I want you to take some time to think about it yourself first. As you think about complete, recall, open-ended, WH, and distance, which questions do you find you are most drawn to just naturally as you're reading with kids, even if you don't have them planned in advance? Which of those types of questions are you drawn to? And then you can share it out with us when you're ready. And you know what? If you don't want to share it out, you can even type it in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. I'd just like to know which questions do you, I see WH from Lauren. Okay.
I always like the distancing questions because I like to know how they relate to the story and to expand on it.
I do that a lot too, Melanie. I find that I jump straight to distancing a lot. I want to see them relate to themselves. I see Lauren has WH questions, and I see Alicia has recall questions.
I'd probably do recall a lot.
Recall. And is any one of these more right than the other? No, that's okay. The main thing is to be aware of what you're drawn to, so you can continue to do that. But on the next question I'm going to ask is the flip side of that. Which of these questions are you least likely to do if you haven't planned them in advance? Like, what's a question that which type do you probably guess that you ask the least? Open-ended.
Open-ended just because of time. A lot of times little ones have a very long answer if there's not like a right answer.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And those stories from an open ending or a distancing question can go on a long time if you've got the whole class of kids, right? So you're right. So, and I see that Whitney says, I struggle to plan open-ended, to ask open-ended questions if it's not something I've planned for in advance. Okay. So what you'll want to do, and I do this too, I find myself, I do distancing and open-ended because generally when I'm in working with a group of kids, it's sort of like a story time or a special sort of event. I do not always ask completion questions. And I realize that I have to intentionally add more of those in, especially if it's a book that has a predictable pattern like Goodnight Gorilla, because when kids know the answer to something, it releases dopamine in their brain, which kicks up. Like, so when like Pete the Cat, call this one out. I love what does Pete the Cat love?
Shoes.
Yeah, he loves his shoes, right? He loves his white shoes. He loves blue shoes, whatever he's got. How do kids feel when they're telling you, I love my white shoes? How do they feel? Happy or nah? Happy. They feel so, they feel groovy.
Groovy. He's always groovy.
They feel cool. They feel groovy.
He's Elvis. He's Elvis.
Yeah, school shoes is another one. And that's a perfect one for this time of year. Pete the Cat is like Elvis. When we ask kids like, good night, like what did he say? He said good night. And we have the kids or the adults, if we're doing a family event, repeat those predictable phrases. Kids like predictable things. They like rereading a book over and over because it gives you that feel good response in your brain to know the answer. And so I am guilty sometimes of leaving out completion questions. So I leave out that experience for them. So I say all of that to say, no one of these crowd prompts is better than the other. They are all important and they all encourage dialogue and language development and vocabulary. And so what we want to be sure and do is that we include all of them. So as you are picking out your books for the week, one thing we'd like you to intentionally try to do this year is to take some Post-it notes, write crowd, and just brainstorm 5 questions for that week. Remember, not for each sitting, but for that week, you would like to engage in a dialogic reading experience with your children, okay? So now that we understand what the crowd prompts are, let's go back to the top of page 11. I'm gonna move my chat box over here so I can see the PowerPoint, okay? So the top of page 11 talks to us about peer. This is the routine that you saw Jamie and I go through, okay? The P is that crowd question. It's the prompt. It's when I said, would you like to bring an animal home from the zoo? Which animal would you like to bring? Okay. Then I'm going to evaluate and reflect on the child's response. So I listened to Jamie say she wanted to bring a lion home from the zoo. And my thought as her teacher in that moment was, okay, how can I expand her description and her vocabulary around lion to be sure we really understand what a lion is? So I expanded it. I talked about putting a mane on it. Now, I didn't just say mane. If you were watching your screen and you could see me, did anybody see what I did with my hands? I did nonverbal cues for what a mane is. And that way, if that word mane was new for her, then she could see my hands and see I was making that mane. Okay.
And it even helped me remember as an adult. I mean, it helped me as a cue. I needed it.
Yeah. And then when I did roar, I also did nonverbal cues for roar too. And so that way for the next part, children, you expand it and then you invite children to repeat it back with you. Okay, repeat that description back with you. And you can do those nonverbal cues together. You can say it together, or you can just do like when I realized we were going to talk over each other because we're on Zoom, I stopped talking and just did the nonverbal to help her remember the description. Okay, so that is dialogic reading. And if you look, I know Jamie and Melanie went over with you earlier today that we are trying to be really intentional to make sure that we are covering all the developmental domains here. When we work on dialogic reading, we are working on communication and cognitive development because we are working on comprehension of the story and increasing vocabulary and expressive and receptive language. Does that all make sense to everybody so far?
And
okay. All right. And Jamie, go ahead.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your words there. We had talked about that when we submitted to KDE that we have evidence-based practice research here that's peer reviewed from the What Works Clearinghouse. This is a summary of that study. When you look at this, you notice the receptive language effect size is 1.58, which is incredible because anything over 0.4 is considered to be significant, and the expressive language is 2.05, and then the average for oral language is 1.81. But again, it is the most significant strategy. And you know what's incredible about it, and we've all talked about this so much, is that what do you need? You need a teacher, you need your kids, you need a book. I mean, it's not going to cost you a ton of money, but you do have to be intentional and follow those steps. The next slide is the What Works Clearinghouse shows how much improvement index that would come from this. And it's amazing how much growth, percentile growth that children can have. Because Allison, we talked also about how with oral language, in the evolution of the reading rope and then where it's going next, considering those social cultural norms and your schema, your context, everything you bring through this really can lift and make a difference for kids that haven't had a lot of language exposure. And we know that many of your kids may not have had language exposure, so that's so important.
So do you mind to hit slideshow on that so it's a little bit bigger? Thank you. So later today, and we'll go over this more in detail, we are going to meet together for this morning. Okay, we're already a chunk of the way through our actual face-to-face together. Your afternoon time will be spent on some independent projects. Okay, one of your independent projects will be to take a book of your choice and that you're going to be using recently, and I'm going to share more of this later, but you will be writing crowd prompts for a book that's in an upcoming unit for you, okay? And so as an example for you, if you will look on page 12 and 13 of your handbook, on page 12 are those crowd questions I just went over. On page 13 is an example of a scripted peer interaction that you might have with a child, okay? If you look on page 14, there is a blank form that you can use later to write your own crowd questions. Like I said, that's not something you're going to do right now, but I want to pause right now because if you have any questions about how to write these crowd prompts, please put it in the chat box now or mic on and ask them before we move on to the next component. And if you're all good, you can just type all good or let's keep going. Just some kind of feedback since we're not face to face and I can't see your faces. That would be really helpful to me. All good from Whitney? All thumbs up? Okay. All right, guys. I just want to good here. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, guys. I just want to be sure. Sometimes on virtual sessions, you can feel like that you're disconnected. And I wanted to be sure that you know I'm here. We are here. Jamie's here. Melanie's here to answer any questions and help you with anything. We don't want to leave you with an experience later that you feel stressed about or don't understand. Okay. All right. So good night, Gorilla. Now we're going to move into connected. We've done our dialogic reading. We're going to move into some connected literacy experiences and look at universally designed learning across developmental domains. In upper grades, we'd say across the content areas, because we're going to get into different standards like science and curiosity. So we're going to move into that direction now. We've got oral language. But before we do that, well, not even before we do that, this is a part of it. Everybody stand up wherever you are. I know, nobody wants to do this, but let's do it. Okay, let's stand up, get in your bag, move my camera so you're not just looking at my belly, and get out this book. And we're gonna do this together, okay? Eric Carles from head to toe. And let's just get started. All right, I am a penguin, and you can mic on or you can just do it and I can watch you, okay? You do what makes you feel happy. I am a penguin. I can turn my head. Can you do it? All right, let's turn our head. Oh, that feels good. Anybody else's neck pump? I can do it. Say, I can do it.
I can do it.
Right. I am a giraffe. I can bend my neck. Can you do it? Let's bend like the giraffe. Oh, and all the way up. I can do it. I can do it. All right, turn the page. I am a buffalo. I can raise my shoulders. Can you do it?
I can do it.
I can do
I need to do it. Oh, I need to do it again.
That felt good.
Okay. I just realized the little girl's face is a little angry. All right, I'm a monkey. I can wave my arms. Can you do it?
I can do it.
I can do it. Okay. All right, we'll do one more page. I'm a seal. I can clap my hands. Can you do it?
I can do it.
Can do it. All right, everybody stretch up. Give yourself a pat on the back.
Oh.
Stretch, twist. Okay, have a seat again.
That almost looked like a twirl.
Oh, did it? Did my skirt come up on my dress?
No, it was all good. It's a
Oh,
beautiful
okay.
twirl.
Whew, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness. Okay, so here we are. So I adore this book. It pairs so well with Goodnight Gorilla because it's about animals. Okay, so these two books, I like to find books that complement each other. But before Jamie puts those slides back up, what developmental areas did we just work on with children? So we've got comprehension, we've got, or not comprehension, sorry, I got a text message that I read the word. So we've got communication, motor, cognitive, gross motor skills, absolutely, gross motor skills. Show me one of the gross motor skills we did. I'll do one. I'm gonna do the monkey. Oh, I see clapping. Okay, you're right, gross motor. What else do we work on? Let me ask this. Is there any communication involved in that? Oh, naming body parts and listening. Yes, listening is a part of communication. Okay, so also children learn things by listening to our speech and repeating it back to us. What was the repetitive phrase in that book? Just say it out loud. It's okay if your mic's not on. I can do it. Yeah. So when you, I see you put it in the chat box. Thank you. So when you go out on the playground, or you're saying, okay, can you line up? The kids could say what? I can do it. Okay. Can you do the slide? I can do it. Okay. So we're learning language through that repetitive phrase. Okay. Something else that's cool, and listening is obviously a part of that, because it's almost like Simon Says, right? I mean, this is almost a Simon Says-ish book, because they're listening, watching, reading your nonverbals, and parroting that back to you. Okay. I'm gonna have to turn that off. Does anybody have a family chat on their phone, and then all of a sudden the family chat starts just ping, 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 pinging? That's what you're hearing on my watch right now. So I'm sorry, I put it on silent. Okay. So the other part that I think is super interesting is, and I really hadn't thought about this until the last year, anytime you are working on fine motor or gross motor, you're also working on self-help. Tell me, everybody do your arms up like the monkey, stretch up tall. What might children have to be able to do to be able to move their arms like a monkey? What self-help might they need to be able to do this? You can put it in the chat box, or you can mic on. What self-help skill involves this?
So are you asking them how you would use this later as
And it is related to a self-help skill. When might you use it? Did somebody say something? Getting dressed. Yes. We have to be able to move our arms up like this in order to get dressed. When else might children need to be able to do this?
Stretching during class, gym class.
Yes, if they're stretching in gym class and doing some of those locomotor things with movement too. Yes. Also, if they're reaching something off a shelf, how many times are things higher than a kid's, shoulders? Often for little children, right? You think they often have to reach up to grab what they need? Okay.
It's probably why their shoulders are in better shape than ours. They use
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just think that's really interesting. Anytime we're working on something with fine or gross motor, I want you to think about, how does this help them with self-help? Okay. All right. Getting dressed is a great one though. That was the first thing I thought of. And then I thought of the movement, like you said. All right. You want to put the slides back up? And we can show that. Get my book. So there we are. That's what we're working on. But primarily, you're right, that was a gross motor task. It also kind of wakes up their brain a little bit to prepare for communication and other cognitive things.
We talk about the relationship again, about more research and about movement and language. And it's really, we've had all kinds of evidence-based research that shows us the connections. But, we even also have anecdotal type counseling and things. Have you ever heard, if you're in any kind of relationship, that if you're having problems talking to each other, get up and move, take a walk. I mean, something simple like that. I mean, so that we know that the motor system provides opportunities both for practice and production of sound, which makes language, but also even emotionally about being able to communicate and about being able to express yourself and about what goes on in the brain. So it's twofold. It's movement and language are so good together. We know, and we've not talked about this much yet at all, but we found that we have a special family member that we love so dearly, that language early on was very difficult, and movement really brought that forward. And we've learned a lot about that, haven't we, Allison?
Oh, I was on mute. Sorry. Yes. So she's talking about my son. My younger son, Jonah, is a stroke survivor, and Jonah is diagnosed with cerebral palsy and epilepsy and autism. And so a lot of times in a speech class, we would find that Jonah wouldn't talk in a speech class, but if you would take him outside and you would be working with a PT, and he would be moving and have the option like to walk around or even be in a wheelchair and just move around and see different things, he would talk so much more. And so that's really what made me personally as a mom start looking at the relationship between movement and language and how they're interconnected. We know that if I'm sure you've heard this before, that a child who crawls is less likely to struggle with reading later, or they're at a greater chance of being I'm trying to think of how to say this the best way. They're at a greater chance of typically developing and reading. I want to be really careful with those data, okay? Because my child, or the information that tells us that, because while it is true, I want to be sure that we understand that that's a correlation and not a connection. But as I was talking with the PT, my son didn't crawl until he was 18 months old, and he didn't walk until he was 2.5 years old. Okay. And so as a parent of my older son, who is 16, when he crawled on time and when babies are supposed to crawl, and I heard that data I heard those correlation about, okay, well, a child who crawls is more likely to be typically developing and reading in 3rd grade. How did I feel as a parent for my typically developing child? I felt pretty good, right?
Just like, thank goodness, something I can check off.
Thank goodness, yeah. But how do you think that felt as the parent of a child who was nowhere near crawling, who was just learning to sit up at the time other children were crawling and walking? If you're guessing that felt terrible, you would be correct. And so I had a conversation with this PT about this as we were working on crawling when he was, I don't know, I guess we started working on crawling when he was probably 13 or 14 months old. And I spent so much of my time, he would be in this little froggy position, and the PT that came in our house for First Steps showed me how to like get on my hands and knees on top of him and move his legs for him and move his arms for him to get that motor pattern. After doing that for a few weeks, or a couple of months, Jonah was crawling. And we talked about reading, and because she'd heard that before too. And so what we want to understand and we want to think about with those data is it doesn't mean that it's connected, but for a child to crawl, they have to be able to do what? About their brain. And I can't see you at all right now. So I can only see the slides and Jamie. So you can mic on or you can put it in the chat box. But in order to crawl, you probably have some 3-year-olds who are still working, or they use crawling to work on core strength, right? No matter if they're typically developing with gross motor skills or not. It's a great core and shoulder exercise to crawl on the ground like a bear. Okay. So, but in order to do that, what has to happen in your brain? To move my right arm, which side of my brain activates? My left side of my brain, right? Okay. To move my left arm, which side of my brain activates? My right side, right? So I have to, my brain, my left, my right, my left, my right. Because what happens?
Point out, Allison, you're asking completion questions.
Oh, look at me. Look at me. Okay. So we call that my brain is crossing, right? I'm using both sides of my brain together. Well, could that be connected to reading? Being able to use both sides of your brain together? Yes. Okay. So when we say that, it is a correlation. It does not mean, if you hear someone say that, it does not mean that a child who does not crawl will not be able to read on grade level. We all know children who just skipped crawling, right? So it does not mean that. But what it does tell me as their teacher is if it's not that, then I'm going to work on other gross motor things, and I'm going to work on things like crossing midline that make them use both sides of their brain together to get a similar experience to crawling. Does that all make sense so far, people, friends? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So all of that to say, movement is important. Listen to what you hear people say about movement and reading being connected, but listen to it as a correlation and to not see it as a barrier for, okay, that child didn't cross, so that's not going to be possible. Think about other things you can do to cross midline, okay? Like I can do clapping songs, I can do things where I clap like this. There are all kinds of activities you can do. There are love you rituals you can do where you cross midline, all sorts of ways to promote that, okay? So let's move on to our next. If anybody wants to talk more about that, you've got my cell phone number there. You can call or text me anytime. You also have my email address on the very front page of your handbook. We'll go on to the next slide. And this is also on page 15 of your handbook. And you're going to need to get out one of my very favorite materials from your bag is the Alphabet Zoo. So go ahead and grab that out. And grab a flashlight. I don't have a flashlight, so I'm going to use the flashlight on my phone. So that will work well if you have a phone next to you. And open up your shadow zoom. And I am going to choose an alligator because my alligator starts with the same letter as Allison. You can choose the one that matches your name, or if you don't like the animal that matches your name, you may choose any animal that you just love. Ooh, Jamie fish, jellyfish Jamie. Show me what you got, everybody. Melanie, you got a cat?
It's a monkey.
A monkey. Sorry, I couldn't see. I thought
It's orange, so it's kind of hard to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I see. It's a monkey. All right. What's everybody else have? We have is that a walrus? Whitney
Oh,
has
that's
a
cool.
walrus. I love those teeth. I'm
do
gonna have to
too.
look at my walrus because I did not realize that we had a walrus. Those teeth are something else. Look at that. All right, what else do we
I want
have?
to do my teeth. I want to do my teeth when I see
I don't
it.
know if you have teeth.
My own teeth.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Makes me
you
want to
have-
be. I want to be named Whitney.
Everybody do their
too, I
animals' teeth.
Hey, I had Whitney envy. I wanted a walrus when I saw hers. Kara, I can't see what yours is. It's dark. Let's see. I bet I can figure it out though. Let's find the. Oh, you're a kangaroo. I bet. If you went with the letter of your name, I do like the kangaroo. Okay, let me turn my page here. Alicia, what are you? I can't see what you are. Oh, you're like me. Look, she's already got her flashlight on. Okay. Heather, what are you? Lauren, let me look at what you are, Lauren.
I'm a penguin.
You're penguin. Oh, turn your head like a penguin, like we just did in that book. I love that.
Mine's a hippo.
Oh, a hippo. I love the hippo. And a zebra. Yes. Okay, perfect. We all have our animals. So I'm going to go to a dark space. And that it's not going to be this room I'm in because it's all the windows are in here. So I'm going to go. Woo, I'm going to take you into my laundry room because I am home today. Because my older, I don't know if Jamie told you, but it's not just her that has COVID. It's our my older son has COVID, so I'm home with him today. So I'm going to be in the dark. I'm going to turn my flashlight on. And all right. So I want you to do the same thing. So you can turn your lights off, or you can find a dark spot like under your desk, somewhere that you can make a shadow puppet. I'm making a shadow puppet on my wall right now. I don't know if you can see it. It's my alligator. And we're going to sing the Shadow Zoo song together. Okay. And I left my book in the other room. Let's see if I can just remember it. Okay. Shadows, shadows on my wall. Animals, animals, big. I'm going to make it big and small. I'm going to make it little. Dancing, dancing in my light, playing, playing through the night. Shadows, shadows on my wall. Animals, animals, love them all. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to give you like 90 seconds, 2 minutes, a minute and a half to 2 minutes to just explore with your shadow puppets. And I want to hear what you wonder. So I wondered if I could make them big, and I wondered if I could make them small. I want to hear what you wonder about your shadow puppets. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet now. Jamie, you can pause the recording, and we're going to give you a little time just to explore with your shadow puppets. I almost wish. Okay, so for any friends who are joining us on the recording, we've just explored shadow puppets, and then we just heard some great ideas for what your children might do if they were wondering. And I will summarize if they were exploring with this. And if you want to mic on and share it, you're welcome to, or I will be happy to share it for you, whichever makes you more comfortable. Does anybody want to share? Okay. I'm going to share the ideas that you had. We had one participant mention that they're 3D. And so it's different than paper shadow puppets. And so you really get into some math skills of 3D and how the shadow puppet changes in different directions. Another friend mentioned that a zebra doesn't necessarily look like a zebra as a shadow puppet. It might look like a horse or a dog or a unicorn. And so we're getting into different types of vocabulary. And then Melanie shared that what she would have her children do, or her grandson do if they were exploring this, is they would tell a story. So like Everett would have an elephant. He might like the elephant to go with the first letter of his name. And they could write an adventure story together about Everett the elephant, or Everett and the elephant, whichever direction that they wanted to go. So those are all beautiful examples. Jamie, if you'll bring the Google Slides back up. So when we explore the Shadow Zoo song, just to pause there, we are working on communication because we have some phonological awareness in there. We have cognitive because we're talking about things bigger and smaller, and they're parroting that. They're making them dance. They're making sense of those words with their shadow puppets. And we also have some fine motor skills because we have the way they have to grip the shadow puppets and hold the flashlight. That is a tricky motor skill, and sometimes that's better done in partners. The other thing that I have done before is to take a plunger, and I did this at our face-to-face sessions. You can take a plunger, a nice new fresh plunger from the Dollar Tree that's never plunged toilets, and you can take duct tape and tape a flashlight to the top of it. And then if you have a child, like I shared with you, my son is a stroke survivor, he would not have been able to hold a flashlight and hold an animal, but that gives you a stand for your flashlight that only costs $1, or you can prop it up on some books and things. And then he only has to worry about holding the shadow puppet. Okay. So that is one way to scaffold and support that task. Now, to go along with what Melanie said, great minds think alike. So one thing that you can have children do is, if you've just read Goodnight Gorilla or any other animal book, they could tell a good night story about the shadow puppet that they created, right? Like they can make it up that they brought it home from the zoo and tell that kind of story. Or if you have a child who is more interested in literal or sort of nonfiction things, they could tell you about the alligator. So I just made this example on an oversized Post-it for mine. Allison's alligator shadow puppet. Allison's alligator is big and toothy. Then what you can do is take these Post-its. This was on an oversized Post-it, like those big ones you buy that are like, I don't know, 12 by 12. What we did in our face-to-face ECLA session is we posted these up on the wall to make like a big shadow puppet quilt. And then everybody's idea was reflected, and everybody's shadow puppet was reflected. When children feel connected, and then when families come in, they also feel connected. So we've got an oral language experience, we've got some cognitive with storytelling there, or cognitive with telling and teaching about the alligator. And we have some fine motor. So it's really a great integrated project. And then when families come in and they see their children's work up there, they also feel connected, and they feel like their child is connected to the school. Again, that's working on motor, communication, and cognitive. So let's see the next. I'll let you go ahead and share that, Jamie.
Yeah, so we've talked about, phonological processing, and we've talked about effect size. And when you look at this, the effect size for this type of experience is 2.14. When we think about print knowledge, we know that phonological processing has print knowledge and letter knowledge as a part of phonological awareness. And together, when those happen together, is when it makes the difference. I had a dear friend of mine that was teaching preschool in Christian County. And she told me, she said, my kids just don't want to work on alphabet knowledge unless we're working with it with sound. And, you know, and I said, you know, when you take out those producing of sounds and something in real life like that, I guess you're right. It just takes, how meaningful is it without that? So this opportunity for us, a task like we've just gone through, gives you the opportunity to do both. And so when you look over on the right hand side, it talks about the names, it talks about processing, sound memory, and sound blending. All those pieces happen naturally in activities like we just did.
Now, because we're in small group and we're just having a conversation. We did this before. We had, 70 people at a time or more in the room with us. And so we just went ahead and explored with our shadow puppets right after we sang the song and had a conversation with each other. When we did this in May as face-to-face, we stopped and moved to another room. I took a room and I had flashlights on those stands around, and I had white paper out, and we had decorated the room to look like a cave with like stalactites and stalagmites and bear and that kind of thing. So that's why you see this here. I wanted to leave it in so anytime I'm exploring with anything STEM related, science or math, I always use the conscious discipline. My job is to keep you safe. Your job is to help me keep you safe. So, and we would talk about things like, oh, if I look directly in the flashlight, that's not keeping my eye safe. So I do have those conversations with children anytime I'm working with any sort of hands-on material like this, even a flashlight. This is to remind you that you can find the Shadow Zoo song on page 15 in your handbook. That would be something when we talk about environment, if you're going to study animals and you want to have the Shadow Zoo song up and you're by your changing table, or in a space in your room that might be a little darker, maybe in the science center, you've got a little bit of an area that doesn't have quite as much light with a window or something, and they could make shadow puppets on the wall. You could put the Shadow Zoo song there. And page 16 has the directions you could also post for how do you make a shadow puppet. This is not in your handbook because this was something I designed after it just came to me after we had the handbooks printed, and actually like a couple of days before our face-to-face training in May, I thought, you know what, I need to make a scaffolding support for what would we do for children who needed a communication board to tell us about how they play. Now, sometimes children have communication boards that will work for them all day long. And that's wonderful. And if you have that, then that's fine. I made one for this activity that is task specific. Okay. So I'm looking at the content that I thought children might want to explore. And something we didn't talk about earlier, when you're making those shadow puppets, cause and effect is also involved in the flashlight turning on and off. I mean, how many of us have seen a young child that likes to turn a flashlight on and off? It's the same thing as that predictable pattern with Pete the cat in his white shoes, okay, or Good Night Gorilla. The flashlight on, the flashlight off, that's a cause and effect pattern, and it does the same thing for children as far as giving them pleasure in their brain because they know that's what's going to happen. It's cause and effect, okay? So something cognitively that I wanted my children to explore when they do this task is curiosity. I want them to wonder things about testing different animals, okay? That science standard that talks about curiosity and wonder for early childhood. I also wanted them to explore the cause and effect relationship with the flashlight, okay? How do you turn it on? How do you turn it off? We're working on oral language experiences, okay? So they're going to work together if they want to. They're going to be telling me yes, they're going to tell me no. They might switch out animals and tell me different animals they want. And as far as math, I'm looking at big shadows and little shadows. So I took all of those content, all of those standards that I wanted each of my children to have the opportunity to explore and put it into this communication board. Okay, so I don't know if you can see me, but I have a big version of a communication board here printed out. In our Shadow Zoo, we had this up, but I also had little communication board cards that were in each person's exploration bag. Okay, so you can see there that the children could explore each of those content things and be able to communicate that using that communication board. All right, so we just talked about that, so we'll go on past this one. The next thing is children can, you know what, I think we'll hold off on this one. I think we did, we're going to move forward. I think we're going to skip and move forward on this one. Oops, go back one more. So when Melanie earlier talked about how she would use the experience for emergent writing and let them write a story with their shadow puppet, I think that's a fantastic idea. Just to remind you there, if you do that, you're working on communication, motor, and cognitive. And then when Jamie advances to the next slide, or if you have your slide deck up, you can see a student example of a child saying good night. Let me pull mine up. See if I can get it. She's had to step away, I think. Let's see. Jamie, can you advance to the next slide, please? Oh, it's not there. That's okay.
I apologize. We had a little thing going on with a friend of yours called Dog.
Okay. Jamie, can you find where the emergent writing is? It's not showing up on the slide. Let me see if I can see which slide that is.
Okay, I'll go find it.
Somehow it looks like it's gotten moved. In my version, oh, it's backward. It's back one. If you will open it back up, it's slide 50. Or I can share if you'd rather.
No, I'm good. I'm getting it up right now, so sorry.
Okay.
It's there we go.
There you go. Okay, so that's just a student example of what they may write after, like what Melanie talked about, if they did good night. And this one was hippo. We had someone do the hippo. I think Kara did the hippo, but this would be what they might draw or tell as their story for night hippo. And they would tell you tell you the story orally, draw it, and then you could help annotate like on a post-it and put it on there and post it also. So thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. We're going to scoop on past that one. We'll go over that one. I think in our January session, we're going to hold off on that. So the next item that you have in your bag is the Alpha Breaths book. And we are almost done. You've done a lot of tasks today, so we're going to do a little self-regulation activity. If you will open your Alpha Breaths book to that, we'll just do A. We'll just do the letter A for alligator breath. I chose A for alligator breath because I was working with an alligator and it was the first one. If you are working with a child and you have a little bit of a period of transition, like, oh, we're waiting for our lunch to be here, I keep this book on hand and I'll just say, okay, somebody give me your favorite letter, and we'll open up and we'll do that letter breathing together. Or if I see my children are really tired, or if they're really excited, when I need to change the energy or refocus them in a room or during a transition, then that is when I use this book. Okay. So alligator breath, we're going to do it together. Open your arms wide like alligator jaws on the in breath and snap them shut on the out breath. Okay. So here we go. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. One more. Breathe in and breathe out. Okay, similar to our Bailey Bear experience with the star breathing and things, this is just another tool. Again, you'll want to practice these when the children are calm and relaxed, and then later when they are upset and they're in blocks or in the playground or whatever, then you can pull back up that tool and you'll say, you know what, that was really frustrating. Before we talk about this, before we do anything else, let's have an alligator breath together. Or if you have a sensory space in your room, and you have been using this routinely, especially if you pick a few to use routinely that children will know, then you can put this book in your sensory space, just like you could your conscious discipline bear. Okay. It is also interconnected to our theme because it is still about animals. And we're pretending like that is our thematic study for this experience. When you do that, you are working on self-help and social emotional because that's self-regulation. We're also working on communication because we're listening and we're receiving that information, and then we're doing it back with our bodies together. Another example that I want to show you that you can do, if you look on page 17 of your handbook, you can take your bear. And now this is just a I love you ritual that is not from conscious discipline. It's just sometimes library story times called these tickles. This is just a nursery rhyme you can do with a child. I just wanted to show you that you can personalize this Bailey bear. All you have to do is cut out a circle in cardstock or felt, draw a fish on it if this was the example of the one I'm doing, and you can make yourself your own buttons for the bear to go with what you want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I caught a baby fish alive. You're going to give gentle pressure. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then I let him go again. And you can either rub their back or tickle their back. Okay. I do that one at family story times when a lot of times it's a parent or a grandparent or a relative and a child together. But I just wanted to show you, you could also take an alligator and put it on a picture and make a little button for your Bailey bear's belly. Any I love you ritual, any nursery rhyme that you are using routinely or you want to write and use with your kids, you can connect it back to Bailey Bear. That experience that we just did for you was universal design learning. And if you scan that QR code, that's on page 18, you can read and learn more about universal design learning. UDL explorations in early childhood or in any grade level are going to intentionally provide children with multiple means of engagement, representation, and action or expression. Okay. So if you look at page 18 and probably the next slide, page 18 shows what you see on the slide right now. So for engagement, we're going to think about these questions. Okay. Are the experiences, books, and materials aligned with students' interest? So I'm going to be thinking about, okay, so the alphabet zoo, making shadow puppets, reading Goodnight Gorilla, doing head to toe, doing the alligator breathing. Are those aligned to my kids' interest? In my case, and the kids I was working with, yes. And it's also aligned to their curriculum. So it's what we were going to do. What opportunities for student choice and autonomy and independence are available? Well, the students had choice. Now, of the book, we were all reading that together. So that was something that I chose as their teacher. But when we get into the exploration and the shadow puppets, I said you can use the first letter of your name, like I did Allison's alligator, but you can also choose a different animal just because you love it. So you did have choice and autonomy available there. You also had choice and autonomy in what you did with your shadow puppet. Did you make it large? Did you make it small? Did you tell a story? You could play with it in any way that you wanted to. I also gave you choice, or I told you, I usually give students choice about which deep breathing exercise that we're going to do. Give me your favorite letter. Tell me alligator or butterfly. So I give them choice with those things. The next one for engagement is, how is this experience or environment personalized or inclusive to the unique needs and diversity within my classroom? Well, it was personalized in that one thing is I knew we needed a gross motor experience. I knew after you sat and you did all that dialogic reading that you were going to need to move. Okay. Another way is that we had the communication board. Okay. There is another thing that we did face-to-face that I want to show you to personalize the experience. I'm going to wait till we finish with this slide, okay? Representation. Are there multiple ways for students to interact with text and content? Yes, okay? So we had all different types of crowd questions. We had different tasks they could do as they made shadow puppets. We even had different ways they could explore with shadow puppets, okay? They could do it with the communication board. They could do it through oral language. Have I considered varied options for grouping patterns to allow students to explore and discuss content? That's where I'm going to decide, am I doing this circle time? Am I putting this in a science center? It might not be that all this is whole group, and it's probably better if it's not a whole group. Some of it might be circle time. Some of it might be small group. Some of it might be in their science center. Some of it might be in their sensory break center. Some of it might be in the reading center, okay, for dramatic play. I'm going to think about how to break that up for my learners best, and it will look different for each of us. Action and expression. Have I considered multiple ways for students to respond and share their thoughts and creations? Am I providing students with access to time and tools they need to explore, create, and share? Okay. So Jamie, if you'll turn do you mind to turn the You mind to turn the screen on? Thank you. I could not get the word out. So thank you so much for knowing what I meant for you to do. So I shared with you this. Can you all see me right now? Am I big on your screen? Okay. So this is the communication board. But something else I wanted to show you that I had available to children when I do this. Well, the other scaffold I have is I have the light on that stand, so it can just be turned on and off and nobody has to hold it. But in order to hold this animal and make a shadow puppet, it's pretty tricky. You gotta have a pretty good grasp. And can all of our learners hold things really well with the tip of their thumb and their pointer finger? Or do we have some children that cannot do that? Yet.
Yet. I like the word yet, but we definitely do.
Yeah. So your level of scaffold and support there will depend on the readiness levels of your children. If you're at all in doubt, talk to your child's OT and PT. Okay. So like my son has cerebral palsy. When I have any question at all about how to modify anything, the first person I go to is my son's OT usually. And then I'm going to go to PT if it's something more gross motor. Okay. But something I learned from him, I've been to a lot of OT with my son, and he could grasp with his whole hand, like a lot of children can grasp with his whole hand easier than he could grasp with a pincer grasp. Okay. So what I made for him is this is a clothespin. Can you see it? Okay. Because I can't see myself. So a clothespin, and then I take the alligator or the leg of the animal or whatever he wants, and I can wedge it in that old-fashioned clothespin. Then I took this athletic tape, the kind that's like just, it's not like glue sticky. It's just like the fabric is sticky. Do you know what I'm talking about? They called it kinesio tape, but sometimes it's just called sticky tape. You usually get it in the athletic area. On pencils, on paintbrushes, on anything, you can build up and make a gripper for them out of that. Okay. Give them something textured to hold on to. And then they can put it in front of that flashlight that you have stood up for them, and they can hold it like this and they can still see that animal. Okay. It works. I've tried it with several different animals. Watch, I'll pick one that it doesn't work on, but I've tried it on several. Look, there's the lion. Okay. You can use this little guy to hold almost anything. And again, that's just like an old fashioned clothespin. I got it at Hobby Lobby. Okay. And that's just that gripper tape right there. I have a paintbrush I can show you in a minute that I built up. We've built up pencils like this before, but that is another example of a way that I created a tool to support my learners. Okay. So for my learners, I needed a communication board and a gripper, and I needed my flashlight to be mounted as an option for my children. You might need different things for your learners. Okay. You may have a child who doesn't like the dark, and you can't do this activity completely in the dark. You're going to have to just have an area that has a little bit dimmer lighting for them to be able to do it. Okay. You can think about your learners and their needs and figure that out. Now, Jamie, you can put the slide back up, and you can, if you don't mind, to please put the slide back up, and let me ask that in a nicer way. And then if you will look at page 19 in your handbook, this will be easier for you to see. I took my object. Okay. So I'm pretending that I'm designing an extended universal design learning experience from Goodnight Gorilla. Okay. And my object that I had that I wanted to design an experience for my children with was this A to Z animal kit and a flashlight. My literacy skills that I wanted to target were phonological awareness, writing, or an oral language. Okay. My setting was a mix of whole group and small group. Which books, songs, nursery rhymes am I going to pair with this? I chose to do Eric Carle's Head to Toe. I chose to do my Shadow Zoo nursery rhyme that I wrote myself. And then I also chose to use the book Goodnight Gorilla. All those things were going to help build a strong language and literacy experience for my children. How does this object connect to my current curriculum? This task will tie two of our units together. One is themed on pets and animals, and the other one is themed on light. And I'm using the Shadow Zoo exploration to tie both of them together. Okay. Then you'll see what I went through is if you look on, toggle back and forth between page 18 that has those questions and page 19. That first question on page 18 is, are the experiences, books, and materials aligned with student interest? So I just typed out student interest, and I typed how it was aligned to my student interest. I said, the book songs suggested above are aligned with my students' interest. 12 out of 15 students shared they would like to visit a zoo on a recent survey when I talked to them. Most of the students selected playing with the light table and or flashlights in the science center during our last light themed unit. So that's just me validating how I know kids are going to enjoy playing, why I believe that this is going to be engaging for them. Okay, representation, varied ways to interact with the text. I'm looking down at that next box. Goodnight Zoo is a predictable picture book so students can chant along with this text. From Head to Toe allows students to do gross motor movements, and Shadow Zoo involves music and singing. Sharing these 3 initial experiences with text and media allows students multiple ways to access prior knowledge on animals or pets. Okay, so I'm telling you that they can interact with moving, they can interact with singing, or they can interact by listening to that book. I've planned 3 different ways to be represented. Action and expression. I'm going to go down and I'm going to talk about the very last question, which is, am I providing students access to the time and tools they need to explore and create? So I'm calling that accessibility. Am I making this accessible? See that word access in that last question? Students have access to developmentally appropriate animal figures and flashlights. And I will note, if you have a child who is seeking oral sensory, so they're wanting to put things in their mouth, okay, and you feel like, you know what, those are like the child is 3 and technically this is 3+, but I feel like that isn't going to work as well for that child, then another adaptation I could have made that I didn't have to make this time is I can use larger animals, like the kind that you put in the bathtubs, you know, that those are bigger, that those go to toddlers, or you can use a stuffed animal. Okay, so that's a easy change there. Individual student notes. JB, cerebral palsy, right-sided hemiplegia, will have access to a mounted flashlight that is already turned on so he can explore holding the animal. BE, he has autism and has mastered beginning sounds, will be challenged to find animals with various sounds in in her name. Introduce the flashlight independently or prior to whole group experience because that child has a sensitivity to light. CK has a developmental delay and is nonverbal. Utilizes sign language for functional words like more, please, yes, no. I will also have a communication board available. I will reduce the option to 2 or 3 animals at a time. So rather than giving them all 26, rather than giving that child all 26 animals, I'm going to have 2 or 3 animals out at a time for that child to choose from. Whole group, sing song at a slower pace to allow more time for processing. So like that is to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And let me tell you what that means. So like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we typically would sing that as twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. That is a really fast process for any child who needs more motor planning time. Okay. To get their words out and to think about that song. So we're going to slow that song down and it'll be twinkle, twinkle, little star. Okay. So for the Shadow Zoo, that's shadow, shadow on my wall. So do you hear how that's slowed down? That's something I can do whole group to make sure that I'm giving enough time for all children to process and understand those words. So that's my UDL planning page. Now, for you all, because I was leading this task for you, I answered on page 18, I answered every one of those questions on page 19. The first part of your independent study project that you're going to do is crowd questions, like we talked about earlier. So yeah, that would be great. That one's perfect. Thank you. So the first part of your independent project you're going to do are crowd questions like we talked about earlier. The second part will be to plan your own universally designed experience. Okay. Now on page 19, I have made a sample for you. Again, though, I answered every single one of those questions. You don't have to answer every single one of those questions. If you just answer one question under engagement, one question under representation, and one question under action and expression, that will be totally fine. Okay. So, and then on page 20, if you'll flip on to page 20, that is your blank page where you can just write in your plan. Okay. That's on page 20 of your handbook. So Jamie, if you'll go on to the next slide. Yeah. So that is reflective of page 20 in your handbook. Okay. All right. So can you go back? Whoops. You want me to share a screen? I can't hear you.
I can do it, or you can tell me the slide number, whatever you prefer.
Let me just share. That might be easier. Okay. See if I can get it. Okay. So this
You're
is that
also-
example.
You're showing us the virtual people's, what their work is.
I'm sorry.
You're showing us the ECLA August virtual list.
Oh, it clicked the wrong one.
Sure.
Okay.
I
Let me do that.
understand. It happens to me.
Yes. Well, it bounced on me. All right, let's see.
There we go.
Is that it?
We're
Okay.
good.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, was it the checklist? Yeah. So that you just saw is the checklist that I'll use for your virtual sessions. Okay. So that's what I use to, as I'm watching yours, so that I know that I gave you feedback. So I don't watch and forget to give you feedback and talk to you about the cool things you're doing in your classroom. Okay. Jamie, do you want to talk a bit about UDL and the levels of support and why we do universal design instruction?
Absolutely. You know, we know that we've had UDL for a while, but we also know not everybody's using it. And it really didn't originate in education, that UDL originated often in design of all types of things like buildings, for instance. And when we look, we're reminded that, you know, in our school buildings, for instance, you know, our doors are accessible so that people can go out and in the door in the most safe way. So often UDL was designed for safety. I mean, but now we're looking at access and opportunity for learning. And that's in a nutshell. And so many countries are much better at this than the United States is, that we're kind of playing catch up a little bit. This is part of the research here that shows the support. But when you give the right amount of support about how successful people can be, it's really, you know, so think about the bell curve and those impact of the bell curve. The bell curve is more about our practices than it is about the abilities of our folks to do the work. It's about how we've designed it, and that's what this is about.
I'm going to go over this one. I'm going to skip it. I'm going to just say it really quickly because Jamie's already talked a lot about effect size. But when a lot of this is connected to universal design learning, because it's looking at students' interest and experience, and we can just see the average effect size of connecting to a child's interest is 0.91, which is significant. It's also connected to asking open-ended questions, providing visual aids, letting them prompt and retell. You can see that all of those, each of those up there have a strong effect size. And those are all the types of activities we chose to put in UDL, our UDL experience of Shadow Zoom. So before we talk a little more in detail about the afternoon, I want to be sure that you guys have these dates and you understand about our virtual session. Okay. So our virtual session August is already posted. Okay. So sometime between now, so today's September 2nd and September 15th, you're going to need to go on and complete that first virtual session. Okay. It is on physical and emotional environment that we just talked about. The rest of the teachers in your district are doing this. Okay. The next session will be posted October 1st, and you will have until November 15th to complete that. That one is on phonological awareness and phonics or alphabet principle. And then our last virtual session will be February, and it will be on emergent writing and multisensory play. You can find this on page 5 of your handbook. Okay, so if this handbook will just have access to everything you need in it, and QR codes and things to get you there.
And Allison, you said earlier, if they want to go in and join with the group that came in May and record together for August, we're happy about that. Or if that group's already recorded, just do it yourself.
That's right. So you can choose whatever is best for you. I think I finished checking off as of yesterday at like 5 o'clock. I think we had about 30 people have done that. So we still have a lot of people who have not done that yet. And so there's a good chance people from your district might still be working, and you'd be more than welcome to join in with them. Jamie, would you like to do this slide? What if we just do it in the chat box, or people?
Great idea. Let's do it in the chat box because we're getting close on our time.
Okay, so we use first and then a lot with children, and I want you to think of something that we'd like to know a penny for your thoughts. So what's something that made you feel excited? What's something that validated your thinking? Or what's something you're wondering now? If you'll just take a minute and add that in the chat box. And Jamie, Melanie, I can't see the chat box, so if one of you could read that out, I would appreciate that.
Sure.
It may just be something you want to try.
I'm not sure nothing's showing up yet. Maybe my internet's lagging.
And if you don't want to type it, you can always mic on and say it, whichever is better for you. So what's something that you're eager to try, something that validated your thinking, something you're wondering, any questions you have? Anything goes. Oh, I just had my chat pop up.
Yeah, here's something, there's a couple in the chat box.
They're coming in. Sorry, I think my
Let's see.
internet was lagging. Go ahead.
Okay, Alicia said, I'm excited to use the shadow puppets. I think my kids will love to create a story using them.
Wonderful.
And Whitney said, I like learning the different breathing techniques rather than just telling my kids to take a deep breath. We've been learning about rules this past week, and we played Simon Says. I like the head to toe book to do along with that. I also like using the alpha breaths as a transition activity or when I need to change the energy. And then Lauren said, I'm definitely trying the alpha breaths.
Those are all great reflections.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. So we're gonna move on, and I have already introduced your independent project. So for our last 2 hours, you're gonna have time for lunch now. Oh, I see Heather has shared.
And Kara.
Okay. Melanie, do you want to read theirs also?
Yes, Heather added, I like the different breathing techniques that can be used with I think, emotions.
Mhm.
And Kara said, I often use the different crowd questions and will be more focused on planning to use them throughout different readings of the same book.
I love this, guys. We only have a small group here today, but look at how each of your, what was meaningful to you or what you took out is a little bit different for every person. And that's why we want to do universal design. We want to offer so many different things without being overwhelming, because every person's going to need and pull home a little something different. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and reflecting and telling us what you want to learn and grow and do, because that's a part of what this network is important, is that we learn and we experience these things together and we share. So thank you for that. So for this virtual session, you're going to have time for a lunch now, and then you have about 2 hours left of your day because this was a 6-hour training. Okay. This is exactly what I've shared for you as we go along, but I'm going to say it now all in one place, and we will have time for you to ask questions and things again, okay? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose a book, any book at all, any book that you know you're going to be reading with kids. You're going to write crowd questions for that book, okay? So your blank form for crowd questions is on page 14 of your handbook. You can use that. Or you're in your classroom, you can go ahead and just put them on Post-it notes and stick them in that book. Do whichever one is best for you, okay? Remember, you have examples of that on page 12 and 13. You all, I've already paused and asked if you had any questions, and you said you felt good on that, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the next part, but know that I'm going to be hanging out on here for any additional questions you might want to ask privately, okay? The second part of your task, okay? So you're doing two things because it's 2 hours, and we're going to give you about an hour to think and reflect and do each task, okay? Choose a corresponding toy or manipulative to extend the oral language experience. So crowd is your oral language experience. Then you're going to choose a toy or manipulative or something you'd put out in the center to extend that experience and design a UDL task. Page 20 has a blank template that you can use to write in, okay? It has questions to fill in. 19 is the example that I did for Shadow Zoo for you. Now remember, in my example, I answered all of the questions because I wanted to have an example for you for everything. You only have to answer one. We're only asking that you answer at least one question or write at least one phrase in each of those, okay? So page 18 is what explains UDL, and it has those questions for engagement, representation, and action, okay? So you're going to take a book, write crowd questions, then you're going to choose a corresponding manipulative or toy and design a UDL task. And you're going to think about, how am I going to make it engaging? How am I going to make sure all children are represented? And how am I going to make sure that all children can take action and have the tools that they need to do this, okay? Then if you click this Google form here, I'm going to click it so you can see. Is it showing up on my screen? It might not because I only shared one screen with you.
Yes.
Oh, it did? Okay. I sabotaged myself. There we go. Okay. So I am logged in as Allison Bemis, so it's already pulling my email address there. If you're not logged in to the browser that you're using, you might have to log in. Then it's going to automatically, actually, I have filled this form out. So I'm going to enter my email. Okay, I filled this out as a test and it's pulled my old form is why you're seeing this. My full name is Allison Bemis. It's going to ask you, how are you feeling today? Okay, just so we can do a little human barometer check. Then I am going to, where it says upload crowd questions, please upload an image, a Google Doc, or a file that shares the crowd prompts you created. So if I decided that I was just going to write in my book to write my crowd questions on page 14, then I would just take a picture of this and I would upload a picture into this file. If I did it on Post-it notes, I'd just take a picture of those Post-it notes and upload it. If I decided to do it as a Google Doc, because you know what, I use Goodnight Gorilla every year and I want to have these questions to refer back to next year, then you would just upload that Google Doc file. We don't care how you upload it or how you send it to us. It can be a photograph or it can be a document, but we do ask that you attach that so we can see the awesome work that you do. And then for same thing for Universal Design Learning Experience, you can type it, you can write it on paper, or you can write it in your handbook so that you always know where to find it. You're going to take a picture of that and upload it. Those two things are required, okay? So you will do that. Then it has a box here that has, if you have any questions or there's anything you want to say to us or talk about to us, you always just put a box on there. So if you have anything you want us to know, you can put it there. Then you'll click submit, and that's how you upload your work. Okay, that's how that we know that you spent the last 2 hours of our training session today planning for things that are useful to you for your children. So I'm coming back to this slide now, and I'll pause here and ask if you have any questions or what questions you have and how we can support you. Or you can do what you did in the chat box last time and tell me all good. We're ready to move on.
Oh, I see all good, Allison.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to assume that we're all good and you know how to reach us. The very first page has our email addresses here. And I will also put my phone number again in the chat box so you can call me as you're working if you have questions or text me. Let me close that out.
Do you want to go to the survey page?
Yes.
Oh, please. Thank you for doing this.
So on September 23rd, I'm going to do a hands-on literacy workshop at GREC. We do still have some space available. I think there's a few spots left. So if you would like to join us for that, you would be welcome to do that. You will leave with another kit of hands-on materials. Each of those will be sensorial focused, so there'll be a sensory activity connected. We're also going to have a hands-on STEAM and SEL workshop on December 2nd, and I think there's a few spots left in that one too. So you'd be welcome to join us. After you do that Google form and you have uploaded your crowd questions and uploaded your UDL task, then you will need to do this survey. Okay, this is how you'll get your certificate that you have done the first day. So you can scan it on your phone, or you can click that link. And then after you complete that survey, after you complete that Google form, not the one where you're uploading your work, but this Google form on this slide, it will automatically generate a certificate of completion to you that has your ELA credit. And if your administrator were to ask for that, that's how you get that one.
Thank you, Allison. I think we're ready to go, Allison.
I think so too. So I am going to stop the screen share. And I'm going to put my phone number again in the chat box.
And I'll put mine. Again, I did it early this morning, but it's a lot to find to get back up there.
And I think that we are good. The rest of your day is an independent study. So the main things you need to know is just submit that first Google form that's your work. You can choose whether you work through lunch and finish early or whether you take a break now and do lunch and finish later. It's totally up to you. We do ask that those come in today though, okay?
Yeah. Please get it to us by 2:30 today, if you can at all.
Yeah, or
Three 3:30 is okay. Yeah, sorry, 3:30 is okay.
Yeah, 3:30 would be fine. And if you're on a different time zone, just say 3:30 by Central time.
Yeah.
Okay. As really though, as long as it comes in at some point today, then that's going to be great. Go ahead and get your certificate. But by September 15th, you need to do that first virtual session. Okay. Because on September 15th, like you saw my spreadsheet earlier where I'm checking people off, that's when I'm going to start sending out all the credit for that. So if it's done after September 15th, you might not get your certificate of completion for that one. Okay. So starting September 6th, like you can finish it on the 15th, but starting September 16th, that's when those certificates are going to go out. And then we'll have to see about like doing things later. It's just best if you have it done by them. That's the due date. Does that all make sense?
Yes, and we thank you so much. You guys have been incredible. I know it's tough on a Friday and it's tough in small group, and we appreciate everything you do. I'm going to stop the recording